As investors watch every piece of economic data that is connected to inflation, we have to wonder, how much longer will this period of rising volatility continue, and are there investment opportunities out there? Plus, I wouldn't be having a real conversation with today's guest without talking tech. That's all happening right now on UBS Trending. Hi, everybody, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. So glad you could be with us today. I'm really excited to welcome to the studio Rick Rieder, CIO of Global Fixed Income at Blackrock, a friend of the studios. Haven't seen you in a while, Rick. It's great to have you back.
Great to be here. It's always fun. Thanks for doing this.
Of course, I'm going to ask you a tech question when we get it a little bit later, but let's give the audience what they came for when they talked to you, is, talking about fixed income. Now, just as full caveat to our audience, we're talking, you and I, before the Fed makes their statement. So we're only going to be doing speculative conversation here. By the time people watch this, the Fed may have already made their statement. But, you're talking about the macro backdrop, Rick, when it comes to the economy, inflation, and what's happening within the world of fixed income. We know that inflation is sticky. The Fed has a big job ahead of them. Will they, won't they start to cut rates at the end of the year? All these questions are up for debate. So where are you right now when it comes to the market, the fixed income market?
So listen, I think you got to start with the economic backdrop and say, and I don't know what Chair Powell is going to say, and it's already said it, people watching it, but listen, the challenge that the Fed has, I don't know if there's a slide that I show that, today you're running inflation that, core CPI is running about 3.5, core PCE is going to be running about 2.8-ish. If you think about Fed's trying to get to 2, numbers are still too high. I show on this page that we've come a long way. Inflation's come a long way. The Fed would like to cut rates. I'm convinced they want to get, Powell's wants to get a couple of cuts in. You'd like to get them in this year. Problem is, the inflation, but why he wants to get a couple of these cuts in is you're killing low income, you're killing small business. Restrictive, if you're running 280, you can be a 4.5 funds rate and still be restrictive. I think he wants to get it there. But listen, you have to operate in the markets with this sense of, gosh, we could have nominal GDP. We have this on the screen here. It's 4.5. So you take 4.5, you take real growth at 2, maybe a little higher than 2. You're running the price deflator. You run at 2.5 or so. It's a pretty good economy. The backdrop is pretty good. And so what will happen, Fed's got to wait a bit, let inflation come down, and sit there with, what is a restrictive policy.
Right, and we're actually sitting here ahead of the jobs numbers that come out this Friday. And obviously, labor has been one of the biggest sticking points for the Fed. Wage pressures, unit labor costs actually came out recently, and it's kind of showing that there's pressure there. So how much do you think right now Powell's thinking, I really better wait to see what those jobs numbers look like on Friday, because that's the big story, is labor.
Yeah, so I agree. And in fact, he's going to wait for Friday, and then he's going to wait for a month from Friday, and because he's got to see a couple of pieces of data that suggest some moderation of average hourly earnings. What's happening in the work week is also a big deal because that affects the average hourly earnings.
Right.
Listen, there's a really, really big deal, and what Chair Powell, I'm sure, will continue to talk about. We've introduced a huge number of people in the workforce through immigration. What's happened is we're expanding the supply of labor. It's actually the reason why we've hired so many people. In fact, I know I've used this stat, 111% of the hires have come from international, 111% over the last couple of 3 years.
I didn't realize the number was so big.
So by the way, we're going to enter a period like what happens with immigration, because if we cut it off, that's going to be inflationary. What's happened is you've increased the supply of labor such a massive way. It's kept wages, even though they're still high, at a level that's not too high. The next couple of months, what happens to the supply of labor, what's happening to that average hourly earnings is going to be a really big deal. My sense is we're still in a pretty good environment for hiring people. There's still, whatever the JOLTS data shows, it's still well over 8 million job openings, big number. So, Chair Powell can sit back, watch the data. My sense is he's going to do that. But I think at his core, you can see we use text mining to get a sense for what direction of travel he's in. And he definitely has moved from, we got a hike, to, gosh, we want to cut. The next move has got to be a cut. But listen, I think he's got to talk about if inflation stays high, we can sit there for a while.
Right, and when might that cut actually happen? I mean, we're looking at like October, November, the last meeting of the year. It's all kind of up in the air at this point. But you, Blackrock, and you and Larry Fink, you guys call this the golden era of fixed income. Even though we still have kind of elevated volatility in the markets, why is this the golden era, Rick?
So I've been doing this 30, I'm not going to say, a long time.
don't date yourself here.
A long time. It's pretty, you think about the last couple of decades, where the funds, particularly the last decade, the funds rate was at 0 or 1% or 2%. You had to stretch to get yield. There's a slide, I don't know if we could show it up there. You can build a portfolio that's close to 7% yield now because the risk-free rate is so high, and you don't have to go out the yield curve. And so, if you build a portfolio, I'll show this, on the left side of this, you can run a high BBB, low single A portfolio where your yield is close to 7, and look at your volatility is very reasonable. You're staying in the curve. You can use investment grade credit, agency mortgages, AAA CLOs, build a portfolio, gets you 6.5 to 7 without a lot of volatility. That is nirvana. If you're holding equities, you're holding alts. It's like, I don't want to do, and by the way, I don't think fixed income should be your hedge. Like, I don't think long end interest rates hedge you. If inflation is higher, they're going to hit rates and they're going to hit equities. Just clip a lot of yield. And then, we get worried about geopolitical, what's happening in an election. I just know if I can sit in 675 yield and just clip income, life is good. And then, then I got to worry about my equities, the multiple too high or earnings. That is pretty good.
Right.
And, I don't have to worry about, gosh, I got to buy tons of EM or triple C high yield to get an extra 50 basis points. Who cares?
Right.
So.
And considering that April was a really rough month on the equity side, but you look at the short end of the curve. We were talking about this 6 month, 1 year, 2 year. I mean, they're all above 5%. The 6 month is closer to 6%. It's what you can clip there is really unreal.
By the way, we've had this huge rate move. If you take the 1 to 3, I'm doing this from memory now, but the 1 to 3 year portion of the ag is up on the year 10 basis points. It's not, it's not spectacular. The back end's down almost 8%. 8%. It's like, by the way, you can clip that yield. Let's say rates move higher next month. You still, if you're clipping 50, 60 basis points a month, you can absorb those rate rises. And then you're going to get to a threshold where I think, and I think they're going to start cutting. I think they would like to start cutting in the second half, closer to the fall. But maybe you can actually throw off real return in the interim. Let's just keep the thing on the rails.
Right.
Why would you take a lot of long duration? Why
it doesn't make any sense. I was literally talking to my dad yesterday, and he said, I don't have 30 years. I probably don't have 10. I said, you don't need it. I said, you can get a better rate at the shorter end.
It's one thing if it was a hedge.
Right.
It's not a hedge.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's pivot for a second, Rick. Well, actually, before we pivot, where do you think the opportunities right now are within the asset class? The best opportunities?
So listen, I don't think we need to stretch today. Investment grade credit, I love it. I love European investment grade credit. If you're a dollar investor, because of the cross currency, you can actually get another 150 basis points. Clip that yield. I think it's great. The securitization market is terrific today. Asset-backed, CLOs. Ironically, one of the great opportunities, if you can use a little bit of illiquidity, commercial real estate, people say, oh my God, I don't want to touch commercial real estate. Office is a problem. But if you get away from office and you look at hospitality, you look at multifamily, you look at warehouse, think about what's happening in a data center, there's some financing opportunities. So that's a little bit off the beaten path, but taking a piece of that. So, and by the way, do it high quality, be a top of the stack lender. Anyway, I think there's some real opportunities without having to stretch. If you're trying to create 680 yield, you can do it pretty easily, 6.5 to 7. If you're trying to create high 7s, it takes a lot of risk.
Yes.
I got to buy a bunch of EM. Do I want to buy Turkey? What's going to happen with Egypt? I don't know. I think you got to be good.
But like you said, even with even a triple B, you're still getting a pretty good yield on that these days. Which is great.
Yeah.
Rick, thanks. So before we let you go, one of my favorite topics with you is always tech. You always talk about the latest kind of innovations within tech, the tech space. What are you excited about right now? What's the thing that's getting you out of bed every day?
So I don't know if it's getting out of bed, but every night my wife's going to kill me because I am so into these Vision Pro, the Apple, not because it's, I think, to get to talk about the other ones that are out, the Meta ones that are interesting. I've gotten both versions of them, and they're great for playing games. The enterprise ability to use, so the reason why I'm using these glasses, it expands your universe of things you could look at. It brings things into 3D. I can work on Outlook, I can work on PowerPoint, I can have my music up, I have text messaging, and it expands my monitor. And the things it allows you to do, so by the way, if you want to be a race car driver, and by the way, not just for it's a fun game, but actually if you want to learn the technical aspects to actually be in the moment there, or fly a plane, or go into a building and see the whole footprint of the building, I think that's going to be something, now you feel like a goofball. My wife's like, you look like an idiot doing this all day. And Anyway, it's going to
Especially
change.
right now in the early days when you might be one of the only people on the plane or the train to be
my
doing it.
God.
You see the
Yes.
hands moving. And
Yeah.
But
No,
I bet in not a long time from now, more and more folks will jump on. And as you always say, the versions of it will get smaller, more compact, easier to use,
It's like your
price
phone.
friendly.
It's like, when you had a BlackBerry, like, don't take that BlackBerry out of my hands.
Yeah.
And then version 1 of the iPhone was pretty good. This thing is heavy, but it's going to, you have to have a battery pack. It's going to evolve. But I think this is something that is really going to, it's called spatial computing, and how you actually think about your world. And, and then you can actually interact. You can see what's outside the, what you're watching on the screen. It's very, very cool.
That's amazing. Rick, thanks for that. I have to go to an Apple store and try a pair for myself. Good to see you as always, Rick
Thanks,
Rieder.
man.
It's a short time that I have with you, but really packed full of information. Great to see you, Rick.
Thanks for having
Great.
me.
And thank you all for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as well. For more information, make sure you're checking out our website at ubs.com/views. Plus, we're on all the social media channels, including Instagram at UBS Trending. You can follow us there. Lots of great video content coming out of the studio. So check that out when you have a chance and follow us. And if you have any questions about what we talked about today, make sure you're talking to your financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. We thank you for joining us. Have a great day, everybody. See you soon.